the quiet town of Mount Vernon, Washington, Emil Grafstra has capabilities unlike anyone around. To access his storage facility, all he has to do is raise his hand. To get into his car, again, put out his hand. Grafstra has 4 radio frequency identification tags in his hand and arm.
Many people thought that I was like working for the government with tracking devices or something. You know, a lot of people were just upset about humans being treated like cattle. Back then it was death threat, death threat. Ooh, that's interesting. Death threat, death threat. Now it's more like, ooh, that's kind of cool. What can it do? What can I do with it? And like, how much does it cost?
A doctor inserted Grafstra's first tag 10 years ago, and since then he's inserted implants into more than 700 people. He also partners with more than 100 body piercers nationwide who have implanted thousands more. Grafstra's company, Dangerous Things, sells $40 do-it-yourself kits, which include the tag, syringe, and non-toxic materials.
The only problems that we've ever had is when somebody did it themselves and they put it in completely wrong. I mean, that's why we partner with piercers and people who are professionals. Yeah, this guy just like rammed it straight into the muscle, and that was a bad thing. But as far as like breaking or anything like that, that places it correctly, which is almost everybody, except for a few exceptions, and do a good job of keeping it clean during the procedure, then there's no risk of infection.
And Emil isn't done with his products either. In fact, he's already installed his latest prototype. It's right here. You can see it. It's 5 times the length of the other devices, and it's called Yuki, which stands for You Are the Key. Yuki utilizes near-field communication to allow for one-time password generation, transferring contacts, Bitcoin payments, and downloading apps. Because the implants rely on power from the devices they communicate with, Grafstra is working on a non-toxic, flexible battery, even having gone so far as to insert a small solar panel into his arm temporarily for testing. It's all part of a movement known as biohacking.
It goes into the body and you forget about it, and it just does its job. It's like your kidneys are working right now really hard, but you don't think about them. They become so much a part of you that you consider yourself to be a new kind of augmented person.
Put this online.
Grafstra says he's had customers as young as 14 and as old as 65, and even installed one in his wife, which the couple affectionately calls an engagement chip.
Moving on now, no end in sight to Daesh's heinous crimes. The Takfiri terrorist group has publicly burned alive 19 Kurdish women for their refusal to serve as sex slaves. The horrific execution of the women is said to have taken place in the Daesh-held Iraqi city of Mosul on Thursday. The terrorists reportedly locked the women in an iron cage and burned them alive. Thousands of Yazidi women and girls are being kept by Daesh as sex slaves, often traded around and denied food and rest. According to UN estimates, the terrorist group has enslaved some 3,500 people, mostly Yazidi women. Last year, UN officials reported Daesh-run slave bazaars where terrorists stripped Iraqi and Syrian girls naked and sold them.
In Japan, 15 more children living near the Fukushima nuclear plant have developed thyroid cancer. The total number of cases since the reactor melted down in 2011 has reached 173. Fukushima's medical association says they will conduct further studies into the troubling phenomena, but maintain their earlier assessment that there is no direct link between thyroid cancer and the Fukushima nuclear leaks.
And now to the United States, where many cities across the nation have seen a rise in violent crimes this year, raising the alarm for national law enforcement officials. Officials say crimes ranging from homicide to rape and robbery have increased in many major cities over the past year. Chicago and Los Angeles are among the cities which have seen the highest rise in homicides. 66 homicide cases have been reported in Chicago in May alone. Now, more than 1,200 people have been shot there since Tuesday, which far surpasses the 800 by this time last year. Police say the rise in killings this year is being driven by a multitude of factors, including the proliferation of guns, disputes over drugs, and fights that escalates into gunfire.
This year's Summer Olympians are already preparing for the threat of Zika virus in Brazil. British long jump champion Greg Rutherford will have some of his sperm frozen before heading to the Games in Rio. His partner, Suzy Viril, told an online women's magazine that she and their young son would also not be joining Rutherford in Brazil. A number of athletes have already pulled out of the games over fears of contracting the virus.
A terrifying scene caught on surveillance video at a Florida Dollar General. You can see a man lurking around the aisles. Then he tries to grab that 13-year-old girl out of the store. Her mother jumps into action, wrestles her away from the man's grip. Thankfully, an off-duty sheriff's deputy was at the store and arrested the 30-year-old suspect.
When I first saw him run out of the building, I mean, I have to be honest, I thought it was just a shoplifting. Shoplifting is just very common at Dollar Generals. I just thought it was just a shoplifting. But once he started yelling, and like I said, I know him personally, I knew his demeanor was off, so I knew something was going on. And then when he said kidnapping, I was kind of, you know, in a little bit of shock there, because it's broad daylight. I was shocked. You know, as a parent, you wonder, especially that I go in there with my children. And it's just, it's sad that we have people like that in society, I think. And I'm glad that it worked out the way that it did, because like the sheriff said, who knows what he would have done later on in the day or a week from now.
Well, that man is now facing a list of charges, including kidnapping and child abuse. Police say the man did not know the child.
Authorities have decided not to file charges against the parents of the boy who fell into the gorilla enclosure at the Cincinnati Zoo. Animal rights supporters have been outraged that zoo officials chose to shoot the gorilla to save the boy. Some of them have called for the boy's mother to be charged, but the prosecutor says the mom did nothing wrong.
She was being attentive to her children by all witness accounts, and the 3-year-old just scampered off. And if anyone doesn't believe a 3-year-old can scamper off very quickly, they've never had kids.
Prosecutor says the zoo did lose a beautiful animal, but he points out a gorilla is still an animal and is not equal to a human life.
The perfect storm is brewing. Obama's last stand as the Zelenskyite community organizer-in-chief has a finger on the trigger of mass unrest. When Obama took office in 2008, 28.2 million Americans were receiving welfare benefits. That number has grown to roughly 45 million under the only president in history to not see 1 year of 3% GDP growth. Earlier this year, it was widely reported that possibly up to 1 million of the country's poorest welfare recipients would lose their benefits under a welfare policy signed, sealed, and delivered by none other than Bill Clinton. The Fiscal Times reports, those affected are people aged 18 to 49 who aren't disabled or raising minor children. Most of them live a subsistence existence, scraping by with the help of government and charitable organizations and low-income jobs, although college students are also eligible. The landmark 1996 bipartisan welfare reform law, crafted by a Republican Congress and signed by Democratic President Bill Clinton, limited benefits for this group to just 3 months in any 36-month period unless they were employed or in a work training program. Of course, that was pre-Obama phone Obamacare. Here we are 20 years later, and those chickens have come home to roost, as the government has reportedly neglected to pay the EBT benefits for 8 days. Michael Snyder of the Economic Blog reports, widespread reports continue to pour in from all over the nation of glitches with the food stamp system. It is 8 days into the month, and large numbers of people still have not received their benefits. And in other instances, it is being reported that EBT cards are simply not working correctly. Michael Snyder continues, on downdetector.com, there are scores of reports of problems with the EBT system from people all over the nation. Could this simply be another example of government incompetence, or is something else at work here? Many things are at work here. The cultural poison George Soros has unleashed on America via Black Lives Matter and MoveOn.org, along with the recently legalized propaganda spewed out by globalist-owned mainstream media taking the side of anti-constitutionalists, fueling violent riots. The Obama administration, the Department of Justice, and the United Nations maneuvering of the Strong Cities Network, a real-time martial law initiative that needs a concrete reason to expand federal control over local police. Not to mention, roughly 11 million illegal immigrants were encouraged by the USDA to take advantage of the United States federal welfare system, as the national debt approaches a hallmark of 20 trillion. Obama has overseen the exponential formation of a class of unemployed welfare recipients who expect to be taken care of, or else. It was reported during the Ferguson rioting that 2 new Black Panther members were planning a bombing of the famous St. Louis Gateway Arch and the murder of the prosecuting attorney in the Michael Brown case, along with the Ferguson police chief. The plan fell apart after one of the accused bomber's girlfriend's EBT card ran out of money. This isn't all happening by accident or by powers beyond Obama's control. Mass food riots are par for the course as a last-ditch effort to install martial law and place the United States under New World Order domination.